Good morning, everyone. It feels like a very long time since we were together. We only missed one Sunday. Huh? So many things happened in between. So I think we stopped on page 121 at line 200. The line is, nature climb towards God's identity. The sentence is, our human ignorance moves toward that nescience may become omniscient, transmuted instincts shape to divine thoughts house infallible immortal sight, and nature climb towards God's identity. So we're reading in Book 2, the book of the Traveller of the Worlds, Canto 3, the glory and the fall of life. King Aswapati has reached the worlds of life. And the first experience he had of that subtle world of life was like a symbolic representation of the realities of our life, full of doubt and uncertainty. Life seems to long to experience extremes of variety, different kinds of delight. A scene was planned for all her numberless moods, where each could be the law and way of life, but none could offer a pure felicity. But at the end of that first section, Sri Aurobindo assures us life is not the puzzling mystery and disaster it seems to be. He says, yet pure and bright from the timeless was her birth. A lost world rapture lingers in her eyes. Her moods are faces of the infinite. Beauty and happiness are her native right, and endless bliss is her eternal home. And in the next section, Sri Aurobindo and Aswapati is given a glimpse of that eternal home of endless bliss, the home of life. He, Aswapati, is still standing on this uncertain soil, but he's able to see the image of a happier state. He sees a wonderful symbolic pictures of that world of eternal bliss. And the section ends with these beautiful lines about how to the inner eye come these pictures in a swift, eternal moment, fixed there live, or ever called, come back to longing eyes, calm heavens of imperishable light, illumined continents of violet peace, oceans and rivers of the mirth of God, and griefless countries under purple sun. And we read on from there that these images that were once a star of bright remote idea, or imagination's comet trail of dreams, for Aswapati now they took on a close shape of reality. He begins to experience the reality of those wonderful worlds. He said that Aswapati is able to see the whole range of life worlds. The very highest ones jut up into a sky of self, where only a miracle's high transfiguring line divided life from the formless infinite and sheltered time against eternity. So it's from beyond that realm, that all these things in earth happen. Out of that formless stuff, time minces shapes. The eternal's quiet holds the cosmic act. And that eternal's quiet is upholding the action of the world force and everything that the creative Shakti does here in the world. He gives a list of her actions, no? And then we came to this sentence. She's doing all this so that our human ignorance can move towards the truth, so that the nescient state from which everything has begun will be able to climb up towards identity with God. That's where we stopped last time. Patty, you'd like to start today, please?
The master of the world, self-made her slave, is the executor of her fantasies. She has canalized the seas of omnipotence. She has limited by her laws the illimitable. The Immortal bound himself to do her works. He labors at the tasks her ignorance sets, hidden in the cape of our mortality. The worlds, the forms her goddess fancy makes, have lost their origin on unseen heights, even severed, straying from their timeless source, even deformed, obscure, accursed and fallen, since even fall has its perverted joy, and nothing she leaves out that serves delight. These too can to the peaks revert, or here cut out the sentence of the spirits fallen, recover their forfeited divinity.
Thank you. Here she is the world force, the divine Shakti, who acts through nature. Anybody would like to ask anything about these lines?
You know, Shraddhavan, the people live in poverty, and such a Mother said money is necessary for the fullness of life. And here the fallen, even the fallen have this perverted joy. So I'm just thinking that should we feel like helping them or doing something for them, or they have their own joy, so we do our own stuff. Sorry to ask such.
No, I think I want to warn us all against taking any of these lines or words or ideas as prescriptions as to how we should behave. He's sharing with us a knowledge which should shape our understanding of life, of experience, and thus influence our actions. But he's not giving any prescriptions, do this, do that, do the other thing. And here perhaps when it speaks of the fallen, it is more the ones who have fallen. Most of us have. We are fallen. We have fallen from the knowledge of our origin and from the contact with our origin. But the world force allows all that. The worlds, the forms her goddess fancy makes, have lost their origin on unseen heights. And who is experiencing all this? It is the Immortal, the Lord himself. So all those worlds, even when they are severed, cut off from their original timeless source, even when they become deformed, perverted, obscure, as we sometimes see here in our world, even when they're accursed and fallen, he says, there's even some kind of delight in that. And all this is part of the action of the world force. But he says, these two, even these worlds that have fallen and that have become accursed, they can turn back to the peaks. Or even here, they can, he says, cut out the sentence of the spirit's fall, recover their forfeited divinity. the soul can find back this feeling of being accursed and fallen. Doesn't need to last forever. It's possible to regain contact with our source and find the true divinity, which is our origin, in whatever way, whatever helps us to revert to the peaks and recover our forfeited divinity. We can accept. Cut out the sentence. I mean, this means the consequence, no? The punishment that can be avoided. If we can get a contact with our true inner being, then whatever karma we've accumulated can just be wiped out completely. So now it returns back to King Aswapati's experience. Tuan, you would read, please.
At once, caught in an eternal vision sweep, he saw her pride and splendor of highborn zones, and her regions crouching in the nether deeps. Above was a monarchy of unfallen self. Beneath was the gloomy trance of the abyss, an opposite pole or dim antipodes. There were vasts of the glory of life's absolutes, all loved in a safe immortality and an eternal childhood of the soul, before darkness came and pain and grief were born, where all could dare to be themselves, and one and wisdom played in sinless innocence with naked freedom in truth's happy sun.
Thank you. So Aswapati can see the whole range of worlds in one sweep, one glance. He sees the pride and splendor of her high-born zones, the noble higher levels, and at the same time he sees the lower regions crouching in the nether deeps, hidden in darkness. Above was a monarchy of unfallen self, a freedom, empire, and beneath was the gloomy trance of the abyss, of the depths of darkness, of matter and inconscience. These are like opposite poles. The antipodes are the point on the earth which are exactly opposite to where you are now. I'm not sure, here we are in South India, where our antipodes are. But for the Europeans, the antipodes are Australia and New Zealand down there. So now he's going to describe some of these different levels. Aswapati can see them all at one sweep. And first he describes these vasts of the glories of life's absolute, where everything is laughing in a safe immortality and an eternal childhood of the soul, in a state before darkness came and pain and grief were born, where everything and everyone, every creature could dare to be simply themselves and feel one with everything. And in that state, wisdom is not burdened in any way. It plays like a child in sinless innocence and plays with freedom, with naked freedom in truth's happy sun. It's one of the highest levels. Then the next level, Jean-Yves.
There were words of laughter and dreadful irony. There were fields of a taste of toil and strife and tears. Her head lay on the breast of an amorous death. Sleep imitated the wild extinction of speeds. The light of God she has parted from his dark. to test the saviour of their opposites. Here, mingling in man's heart their tones and hues, have woven his being's immutable design, his life a forward rippling stream in time, his nature's constant fixed mobility, his soul a moving picture's changeful film, his cosmos chaos of personality, the grand creatrix with a cryptic touch has turned to pathos and power, being's self-dream, made a passion play of its fathomless.
So there are those high worlds of happiness and freedom and wisdom. But there are other worlds where she plays ironically, fields of her taste of toil and strife and tears. Even life seems to be in love with death and to seek extinction in sleep. So there's a meaning in all these opposites of life. The creative world force behind life has separated the light of God from His dark. She wants to taste, to experience the taste of bare opposites, of the pure perfection of light, the darkness of the abyss. She's done that with all her different worlds. There are so many different worlds. But here in our world, all these different worlds mingle and mix and meet in our hearts. We have contact with all of them. And all of them have contributed to our, what we call our human nature. The tones and hues of all those worlds have woven our being's mutable design, the way we are so changeful and not always the same, and yet at the same time there is some kind of fixed limit to our changefulness. The human soul, it says, is a moving picture's changeful film, reacting to all the different experiences. And every human being has a cosmos chaos of a personality, some kind of harmonized, organized to a certain extent. Chaos is supposed to be absolutely disorganized and unpredictable and random. And cosmos is the opposite, where things are organized into a stable harmony. But we human beings, we have a mixture of these things in our personality. And she's doing all this grand creatrix is doing all this with her magical touch. What she's doing is expressing the being, the dream, the self-dream of the pure existence of Sat. She has turned to all these different shades of pathos and of power, infinite self-dream of the pure existence. She has turned all that into a passion play, all that fathomless mystery of the transcendent state she expresses in the varieties of life we experience here.
Shraddhavan, we stopped it at this end of the page.
Yes.
So we need to read through.
We have to read through further from here.
It's pretty unusual that we stop at the end of the page.
No, it is a kind of paragraph here.
Okay.
So we can read to the end of the canto.
Yeah.
Yes? Mihong, would you read? Yes. Yes, please.
When Aurobindo is describing the highest forms of life, is that the same as the divine forms?
He says it's very, very close.
Not the same.
It's not, or it's of course always an expression of the divine forms. But he says there is a miracle's fine dividing line. No. So there's a kind of definition of that limitless, infinite qualities of the transcendent, get focused into what we recognize and call life. It's also defined as what we call mind and what we call matter. These are the properties. We can go on, Neha.
But here were words indeed halfway to heaven. The veil was there, but not the shadowy world. In forms that too remote from human grasp, some passion of the inviolate purity broke through a ray of the original bliss. Heaven's joys might have been earth if earth were pure. There could have reached our divinized sense and heart, some natural felicity's bright extreme, some thrill over supernature's absolute. All friends could laugh and sport on earth's hard roads and never feel her cruel edge of pain. All love could play and nowhere nature's shame. But she had to stable her dreams in matter's court, and still her doors are barred to things supreme. These words could feel God's breath visiting their tops. Some glimmer of the transcendent and was there.
Thank you. Anna, 261.
Across the white ionic silences, immortal figures of embodied joy traverse wide spaces near to eternity's sleep. Pure mystic voices in beatitude's hush appeal to love's immaculate sweetnesses, calling his honeyed touch to thrill the worlds, his blissful hands to seize on nature's limbs, his sweet intolerant might of union to take all beings into his Saviour arms, drawing to his pity the rebel and the waif, to force on them the happiness they refuse. A chant hymeneal to the unseen divine, a flaming rhapsody of white desire, lured an immortal music into the heart and woke the slumbering ear of ecstasy. A purer, fiery sense had there its home, a burning urge no earthly limbs can hold. One drew a large, unburdened, spacious breath, and the heart sped from beat to rapturous beat.
Thank you. Luca?
The voice of time sang of the immortal's joy, an inspiration and life cry. The moments came with ecstasy on their wings, beauty, unimaginable moved heaven them, absorbed from boundaries in the vasts of dream. The cry of the birds of wonder called from the skies to the deathless people of the shores of land. Creation leaps free from the hands of God. Marvel and rapture wandered in the way. Only to be was a supreme delight. Life was a happy laughter of the soul, and joy was king with laughter ministered. The spirit's luminescence was bodied there. Life's countries were lovers for nature's friends, and her extremes keen edges of harmony. Indulgence with a tender purity came, and nursed the God on her maternal breast. Their land was weak, so falsehood would not be. Ignorance was a thin shade protecting man. Imagination, the free will of truth. Pleasure, a candidate for the heaven's fire. The intellect was beauty's worshipper. Strength was the slave of calm spiritual will. Bhavan laid its head upon the breasts of bliss.
Thank you.
There were summit glories inconceivable, harmonies of wisdom's still self-rule, and high dependencies of her virgin son. Illumined the accursed of the seeing soul, throned in the power that transcends ray. A vision of grandeurs, a dream of attitudes, in sun-bright kingdoms moved with regal gait. Assemblies, crowded senates of the gods, life's resonances reigned on seats of marble will, high dominions and autocracies, and laurel districts and armed imperative mights. All objects there were great and beautiful. All beings wore a royal stamp of power.
Thank you. Lorraine?
There sat the oligarchies of natural law. Proud violet heads served one calm monarch brow. All the soul's postures adorned divinity. There met the ardent mutual intimacies, a mastery's joy and the joy of servitude, imposed by love on love's heart that obeys, and love's body held beneath a rapturous yoke. All was a game of meeting kinglinessnesses. For worship lifts the worshipper's bowed strength, close to the God's pride and bliss his soul adores. The ruler there is one with all he rules, the him who serves with a free equal heart. Obedience is his princely training school, his nobility, coronet and privilege. His faith is a high nature's idiom. His service is spiritual sovereignty.
Thank you. Rima?
Therefore, bells where knowledge, joy, beauty, power, in her high home and made her whole become. They ran between the seas, her community, and filled them with the passion of his faith. He all provided of its transparent house, and all her soul, the counterpart of his soul. Apotheosis, transfigured by wisdom's touch, her days became an luminous sacrifice, an immortal love, in thick and endless fire. She burned in his sweet, intolerable flames, a captive life by the short conquer. In his white sky she built her world in you. She gave to mind's calm pace to mother's speed, to thinking and to be what the soul saw, to living in impetuous, to know and see, her splendor grasped her pleasant to him come. She groaned the idea that King Purple Rose, put her magic serpent's
Scepter.
in thought made forms, his inward visions leaping shapes, and her acts the living body did. A flame shining, the creator's flesh, his victor light rolled on her deathless form. A center, mighty gallows bore the god. Life, throne is mine, the double majesty.
Thank you. Norman?
Worlds were there of a happiness great and grave, an action tinged with dream, laughter with thought. The passion there could wait for its desire until it heard the near approach of God. Worlds were there of a childlike mirth and joy, a carefree youthfulness of mind and heart, found in the body of a heavenly instrument, It lit an aureate halo around desire and freed the defiled animal in the limbs to a divine yams of love and beauty and bliss. On a radiant soul that gazed at heaven's smile, a swift like impulse dinted, not nor stopped. It knew not how to tire. Happy were its tears. Their work was play, and play the only work. The task of heaven's game of godlike might, a celestial bacchanal, for ever pure, unstayed by faintness in a mortal phrase. Life was an eternity of rapturous news. Age never came, care never lined the face, imposing on the same.
Thank you. We'll stop there.
Sorry?
We'll stop with face. Age never came, care
Age never came, care never lined the face.
Thank you. Thank you.
Stop it.
That's what I thought. Okay.
Patricia, you go on, please.
Thanks for reading. What does that word bacchanal mean?
A bacchanal. The bacchantes, or the bacchants, they're the worshippers of Dionysus, or Bacchus. In Latin, his name is Bacchus. He's the god of wine and of divine intoxication. So, bacchanals are a bit like orgies, you know. But this is a celestial one, a celestial bacchanal, forever pure, all that riotous enjoyment, but it's forever pure. And our bodies would get tired by that, but in those worlds that doesn't happen. Yes, Patricia, imposing.
Imposing on the safety of the stars, a race and laughter of immortal strengths, the nude godchildren in their playfields ran, smiting the winds with splendor and with speed. Of storm and sun they made companions, sported with the white mane of tossing seas, flew distance, trampled to death under their wheels, and wrestled in the arenas of their force, imperious in their radiance like the suns. They kindled heaven with the glory of their limbs, flung like a divine largesse to the world, a spell to force the heart to stark delight. They carried the pride and mastery of their charm, as if life's banner on the roads of space. Ideas were luminous comrades of the soul. Mind played with speech, cast javelins of thought, but needed not these instruments toil to know. Knowledge was nature's pastime like the rest. Investitured with a fresh heart and early God instincts, child inheritors, tenants of the perpetuity of time, still thrilling with the first creation's bliss, they steeped existence in their youth of soul, an exquisite and vehement tyranny, the strong compulsion of their will to joy, poured smiling streams of happiness through the world.
Thank you. Edita?
There wind a breath of high immured content, a fortunate gate of days in tranquil air, a flood of universal love and peace, a sovereignty of tireless sweetness lived like a song, a large, spontaneous order freed the will, a sun shining, bringing over the soul to bliss. The breadth and greatness of the unfettered act, and the swift fire heart's golden liberty. There was no falsehood of soul's severance. There came no crookedness of thought or word to rob creation of its native truth. All was sincerity and natural force. There freedom was sole rule and highest law. In a happy series climbed or found these worlds, in realms of curious beauty and surprise, in fields of grandeur and of Titan power. Life played at ease immense desire.
Thank you. Sudhanya?
1,000 Edens she could build, nor pause. No bound was set to her greatness, and to her grace, and to her heavenly light. Awake with a cry, and stirs of numberless souls, arising from the breast of some deep beauty. Smiling like a newborn child at love and hope, in her nature housing the immortal form, in her bosom bearing the eternal will. No guide she needed, but her meekness heart. No fault debates the Godhead of her steps. No alien night had come to blind her eyes. There was no use for grudging, need or else. Each act was a perfection and a joy, abandoned to her rapid fancy's moves and the rich colored light of her mind. Initiate of divine and mighty dreams, magicians, builders of unnumbered forms, exploring the measures of the rhythms of God, at will she move her reserved golden drums, a dimensions goddess of delight, a beacon of creative expression.
Thank you. So there's that Bacchant again, and it's equivalent to Dionysian, the worshippers of Dionysus. That's the Greek name, and Bacchus is the Latin name. But they are the embodiments of divine intoxication and delight. Avantika, you would read?
It's about 8 lines, sir.
Sorry?
About 8 lines, maybe. How much will you?
I'll stop you.
Excuse me. Turn of this he saw and felt its calm, but found no way to enter into its joy. Across the conscious gulf there was no bridge, but after a circle still his soul, after an encircled still his soul, tied to an image of unquiet life. In spite of yearning mind and longing sense, to a sad thought by great experienced form, and a vision dimmed by care and sorrow and sin. All this seemed only a bright, desirable dream, conceived in the longing vistas by the heart of one who walks in the shadow of earth's dream. Although he once had felt the eternal's clasp, too near to suffering words his nature lived, and yet he stood where entrances of night. Hardly too close, beset by the world's care, and the dense mold in which we have been made, become sheer joy to joy, pure life to life. For a tormented will to think and live, first to a mingled pain and pleasure woe, and still it keeps the habit of its good. A dire duality is our way to be.
Thank you. Ranha.
In the crude beginning of this mortal world, life was not which place now asked to die. When earth was built in the unconscious void, and nothing was saying in a material scene, identified with the sea and sky and stone, or young God yearned for the beat of soul asleep in objects, vague in eyes. In that desolate grandeur, in that beauty there, in that depth stillness, mid the unheeded sound, heavy was the uncommunicated love of Godhead in a world that had no once. For none was there to feed or to receive. This solid mass, which no ourselves could not contain their vast creative earth. Immersed no more in matter's harmony, the spirit lost its
statuesque
repose. In the uncarried trance, it broke for sight, passion for the moments of the process heart, famishing for speech and joy and love. In the dumb, insensitive wailing day and night, hunger for the beat of yearning and the response.
Thank you. Would you read, please? Yes, you please. Poised in.
in conscience, shaking in touch, leading beauty, silence, ending with the name. They cry to life, with senses new, and new forms in a voice of love to the rich body, like ever home in the unlistening voice, a being seen who breathed where once was not. Something went out in yet unsentient quest, a night conscious existence, worth joy, from the deep fantasy, when faithless time, aware of his own holy creating, remembering his origin self and rise, and what it long to know, inspire, enjoy, to rise, first the front and the left to native life, all flowing from the bright magnificent land, on the rigid coil and stone of modern space. Here through the pastures, great new engine form, for splendor and for sweetness and for bliss, hoping to feel a clear reward with joy.
Thank you, Muktarama. I'm sorry I can't see against the light. So, Larry.
As comes a goddess to a mortal's breast, and fills his days with her celestial class, she stooped to make her home in transient shapes. In matter's womb she cast the immortal's fire. In the unfeeling vast, woke thought and hope, smote with a charm and beauty, flesh and nerve, and forced the light on earth's insensible frame. Alive and clad with trees and herbs and flowers, earth's great brown body smiled towards the skies. Azure replied to azure in the sea's lap. New sentient creatures fill the unseen depths. Life's glory and swiftness ran the beauty of peace. Man dared and fought and met with his soul the world.
Thank you. Sivan, you'd like to read? No? Amrita.
But while the magic breath was on its way, before your needs would reach our visioned hearts, a dark that robes itself with none, and opens to spirit the order of the flesh, imposed a mystic mask of this and faith, enthroned now in the slow and suffering earth, such as the winged and wonderful wayfarer, and then more recall the better spirit, but must obey the inner emotions of insensible foundation of war, in which blind leads our beauty and sorrow and joy is struggling complex life. A deep and blissful newness fell on her. Abolition was constructed, mighty spirit, and slain the womb of childhood happiness, and all for glory into weakness and all for sweetness into main desire. The shepherd with the wolf is here life's bloom. So where was the immortality that she seen? Completely consciousness from unconscious things, and in an eternal place, a need of being that must forever cease, such was the deep mystery of creation.
It's so poignant. So Aswapati is shown the glory of life, her eternal home of bliss and beauty. We got a wonderful description of that. But he can't enter there, although it's real to him, or he's able to see it in a shape of reality. He's not able to enter there because of his human nature and this human substance. So the succeeding cantos are going to tell us how, having seen this fall of life, being swallowed up by the inertia and unconsciousness of matter, how it begins to emerge, how life evolves. That's in the next canto, the kingdoms of the little life, and the canto after that, the godheads of the little life. 2 long cantos about the evolution and the hidden forces which are working behind our experience of life. But we know that King Aswapati set out on his quest in search of the power and the principle that would be able to bring about a divine life on earth. And when he sees this failure of life, that even the higher levels of life, which are described in Canto 6, that they are almost like a trap, that he can't escape from them. You know? He says he feels he has to find the source of all that imperfection. And then instead of trying to go higher, he finds there's a kind of lid or barrier that he can't go beyond. He decides to go down into the depths. And we have 2 terrifying cantos, the descent into night, and then the mother of evil and the sons of darkness. Mother refused when she was working with Bhuta, making illustrations of all this. She said, I'm not going to make any illustrations of Canto 8. I've been in that world, I know how terrible it is, and I'm not going to make images of it to make it more real here in the world of matter. But nevertheless, I regret that she didn't make images of the last couple of pages of Canto 8, because there Aswapati finds the key to nature's change. on the very lowest levels. And that discovery changes everything for him. His whole experience of life is changed completely. And he's, without making the slightest effort, he's just projected into the paradise of the life gods, Canto 9. And there he's able to recover from all the dreadful experiences he's passed through and enjoy that paradise. But it's one of the shortest cantos in the whole book. He doesn't stay there very long because he still hasn't found. He's had a personal liberation, he's found the key to that, but he still hasn't found what he was looking for, the power and the principle that will be able to establish a divine life upon earth. So he moves on to the world of mind, and there too he reaches a kind of impasse, and he's rescued from that by a kind of invitation to enter the world of soul. And there he encounters, has a very close encounter with the Supreme Divine Mother, and recognizes that this here is the principle, the power that he's looking for. Through his surrender to her, he's enabled to enter into the kingdom of greater knowledge, which is very, very close to supermind. It's at the top of the world stair. It's the final canto of Book 2. But having reached that summit of the world stair, become a borderer of the sun, of the supermind, he realizes he still has to move further, and he enters into the book of the Divine Mother. We've still got quite a way to follow him before we can do that. So we can go back to where we stopped. Where was it? Page 123 at the top. So he's seen this whole range of worlds, but now he's shown worlds that were lifted halfway to heaven, which are in some way close to our world. Helmut, what do you read?
But here the worlds lifted halfway. The way was there, but not the shadowy wall. In forms not too remote from human grasp, some passion even violent purity broke through. A way of the original bliss. Heaven's joy might have been Earth's, if Earth were here. There could have reached our divinized sense and heart some natural felicity's bright extremes, some thrill of supernatural absolutes. All strength could love and sport the world's hard roads, and never feel the cruel edge of pain. All love could play, and know where nature's shame. But she has stated her dreams in matter's course, and still her doors are there to listen.
Thank you. Anything to ask or share? There's some veil between those worlds and the transcendent, as we mentioned earlier, but not this shadowy wall of impurity and unconsciousness that prevents us from experiencing them. But still, in those worlds, the forms are not too remote from human grasp. There was something that we could recognize, and into those forms, some passion of the inviolate purity, the origin, breaks through, a ray of the original bliss. But our problem is that shadowy wall. Heaven's joys might have been Earth's, if Earth were pure. There could have reached our divinized sense and heart some natural felicities, bright extreme, some thrill of supernature's absolute. The problem is matter. Life has stabled her dreams in matter's course. So, in earthly life, her doors are barred to things supreme. It's not that earth beings are inherently incapable of divine experience. The problem is in this substance that we embody.
That nature is nowhere. Nature.
Shame, yes.
Nature is, I don't know.
All love could play, and nature's shame couldn't play anywhere. Would not be able to play anywhere. There's that possibility that all strengths could laugh and sport on Earth's hard roads, this material universe, without ever feeling her cruel edge of pain. If only this shadowy wall and this domination of matter was not there. So in what we read about today, what we read to the end of the canto, he told us how that came about. How did life become involved in matter? That's what has brought about the evil mystery of her change. Life whose eternal home is everlasting bliss and delight, who can play endlessly with so many worlds and qualities. How has it become this limited and imperfect and troublesome existence that we experience? Yes, Lorraine.
What is this business with Adam and Eve?
What is this business of nature's shame?
Yes.
The Bible story says that when God first created them and gave them this wonderful world, they were like animals, sinless, innocent, enjoying. But there was some intervention. This serpent came along and persuaded Eve, as the weaker one, to eat the apple, which was the apple of the tree of knowledge. She got some knowledge the animals don't have. And that kind of self-consciousness has led to the sense of shame. Also growing in that paradise was the tree of immortal life. But they didn't get to eat that apple. Perhaps if they hadn't eaten the apple of knowledge, they would have, I don't know. But this, the mother gives in one of her talks a slightly different explanation, which perhaps comes from the Hebrew background, or she speaks a tradition before the Vedas and before the Chaldean tradition, which says that this serpent who came and tempted Eve, it was a rainbow-colored serpent. It had all the colors of the rainbow, and it was actually the force of evolution that came to force them out of their animal paradise onto the next step of development. So that's the step we are in. We've had to leave our animal paradise. Sometimes we long to go back to that unconscious state. Unfortunately, the only way out is up. We have to follow King Nasrupati in his journey, not only explore the depths, but also find the way up to the heights.
I think maybe nature's shame is that she can't keep progressing. She keeps
falling back
and falling back. That's why Auroville is here, so we can learn how to keep progressing.
I often feel
I went to see the
quite
progress
ashamed in Auroville.
That progress garden is really interesting if you've been there to see that it's in 3 levels. And then when you get to the last highest level, you'll have to look down and see that there's a square which represents the truth. It's really interesting. It's like you get to the highest you can do, and then the truth wants to manifest on earth. It's down below you. It's really an inspiring place.
So I have a special love for this last section of the canto, where Aswapati discovers that he can see that world of bliss, but he can't enter it because of his human nature. No? A darker air encircled still his soul, tied to an image of an unquiet life. And then Sri Aurobindo tells us that in the beginning of this world that we inhabit, which is ruled by death, there was no life, there was no mind, there was no desire. When earth was built in the unconscious void, and nothing was save a material scene, identified with sea and sky and stone. That's all there was in the beginning. Sea and sky and stone. Her young gods yearned for the release of souls asleep in objects, vague, inanimate. Perhaps I've told you before, or you've heard me tell, I've told this story many times, about one of Mother's disciples, Uda Pinto, who told her that he'd had a dream, I think a dream, a vision experience, that he was in a pebble. He was a pebble on a beach, and Mother and Sri Aurobindo were also pebbles on the beach, close by, and he was aware of their presence. And Mother said, yes, it is true. The young gods, the divine beings, the souls who'd agreed to incarnate, were first of all in material form, but because that divine spark was in them, there was some possibility of aspiration. And when there's an aspiration, there's a response. So what's described here is the aspiration for those young gods for something else, the next stage. No? They longed for the release of souls asleep in objects, vague, inanimate, unable to express their divinity. And that aspiration becomes so intense, no? That the poised in conscience gets shaken, and the intuitive silence was trembling as if about to utter a name. And the gods cried, the souls cried to life, to invade the senseless mold, this matter here, and to wake up divinity in these brute, primitive forms. And there's a response. There's this yearning to know, to aspire, to enjoy, to live. So the goddess of life in her heavens that called, and left her native light. She overflows from her bright, magnificent plane onto the rigid coil and sprawl of mortal space. And she poured all her splendor and her swiftness and her bliss, hoping to fill a fair new world with joy. She stoops to make her home in transient shape. And so we see the result of all that. Life has emerged, but that didn't happen immediately. First of all, life was this dark, ambiguous presence, questioned all, while the magic breath was on its way, before her gifts could reach our prisoned hearts. A dark, ambiguous presence questioned all. What is this dark, ambiguous presence? This serpent in the garden? Sri Aurobindo says it's the secret will, divine will with a capital W, that robes itself with night and offers to spirit the ordeal of the flesh, imposed a mystic mask of death and pain. There's a similar passage at the beginning of the poem where Sri Aurobindo describes how Savitri has brought all her divinity to earth and how she's challenged by this one who is empowered to test the great. Where can I find that? But anyway, Amal Kiran has written to Sri Aurobindo and asked, who is this one? Here he is on page 17. Page 17, line 215. One dealt with her, Savitri, one who meets the burdened great, a signer of the ordeal and the path, who chooses in this holocaust of the soul death, fall, and sorrow as the spirit holds the dubious Godhead with his torch of pain lit up the chasm of the unfinished world and called her to fill with her vast self the abyss. So Amal Kiran asked Sri Aurobindo, who is this one? Is this love? Is this death? Who is it? And Sri Aurobindo said, I deliberately haven't put any name, but if you like, you can call him the Lord of Evolution. The one who, the Lord of Evolution, the one who forces us to fulfill the soul's mission. But he measures the difficulty with the might. The stronger and greater you are, the more ordeal you have to face, because it's the divinest elements that have to be tested and tried. He made her heart kin to the striving human heart and forced her strength to its appointed road to fulfill. For Savitri to be able to fulfill her mission, Satyavan has to die, and she has to pass through the ordeal of knowing that he's going to die, all alone, carrying that knowledge with her for one whole year. Shall we stop there for today? Thanks to Shraddhavan.